Hi, welcome everyone. It is so incredibly wonderful to be here today with our amazing panel and the Dr. Shawn Ginwright, the author of one of my all-time favorite books, The Four Pivots. I just want to say a few words about that, and I'll introduce myself first. I am Michelle Arellano. I'm the Executive Director for Centers for Spiritual Living and a Minister for Centers for Spiritual Living. So our minister council had Dr. Shawn came out and spoke, and I got online last minute running around, and it was like, oh, this looks interesting. And it just drew me in. I was like, oh, I need more of this. So I went out and bought the book. And when I read the book, it's just transformational. It truly is transformational. And it resonates with our teaching so beautifully. The power of who we are as individuals and the power of who we are collectively and how we move about in this new day of being together in this world is the words I would use. And so every time I have had an opportunity, I am yelling from the rooftops about the information in this book. And I've spoken with our Latin America ministerial students. I've spoken with our ministerial students here in the States. I've spoken with our education uplift. I've talked about it in the field across the board in the communities because it is so incredibly important. And I am a firm believer of the inner outer, and the book really starts with that. It is about who we are individually and how we bring that out into the world, and the new languaging. And I could keep geeking out, so I'm going to wrap it up right here. The new languaging in this book is the languaging that really serves the energy that we're calling in. And so with all of that, I am going to introduce our beloved Dr. Andriette Earl to introduce herself and to do an official introduction of Dr. Shawn Ginwright.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm Reverend Dr. Andriette Earl, and I am the Senior and Founding Minister of Heart and Soul Center of Light in Oakland, California. And I'm giddy, frankly, for this opportunity to share my dear brother friend with CSL more broadly. I believe that Shawn has an amazing, I'm going to call genius heart. It's that heart-mind connection where he has managed to do the work in the community. That's actually how I met Shawn, is he was busy, knee deep, shoulder deep in community work, working with youth. And I am involved in a national mentoring organization locally in Oakland. And so that's how we came together. And I loved him immediately because of his absolute commitment and that he is unapologetic about Black youngsters and the importance of someone standing fiercely for their highest and best. And so that's how I first came to know him and love him simultaneously. And I want to share his bio with you because in some circles, I feel like maybe what I said is enough, but there's a greater depth to Dr. Shawn that I want you to understand and have a sense of in terms of the breadth and scope of his life work to date, because he is cutting it up. So here's what I want you to know about Dr. Shawn Ginwright in terms of his formal bio. That Dr. Shawn Ginwright is the Jerome T. Murphy Professor of Practice at Harvard Graduate School of Education. His groundbreaking work on trauma, healing, and the empowerment of African American youth has earned him a reputation as an innovator, provocateur, and thought leader in the field of education. Dr. Ginwright's vision is rooted in his extensive experience working directly with young people in urban communities. From grassroots initiatives to serving as the chairman of the board of a $5 billion foundation, he has consistently demonstrated his passion for empowering marginalized youth. Dr. Ginwright's research has been instrumental in reshaping the discourse surrounding youth development. His introduction of the concept of healing-centered engagement in 2018 has revolutionized the field, providing an asset-based approach to addressing youth trauma and fostering resilience. His work has been cited in the New York Times, and he is a highly sought-after speaker on topics ranging from civic engagement and youth activism to the transformative power of healing. Dr. Ginwright's contributions extend beyond his academic work. He is a seasoned nonprofit leader, serving as the co-founder and chief executive officer of Flourish Agenda, Inc., a research lab and consulting firm dedicated to unlocking the power of healing and empowering youth of color, as well as their adult allies, to drive transformative change in their schools and communities. In recognition of his exceptional research and dedication to urban youth, he was awarded the prestigious Fulbright Senior Specialist Award from the U.S. State Department in 2011. He is also the former chairman of the board for the California Endowment, where he oversaw a substantial $5 billion endowment dedicated to improving the health of underserved communities. A notable author, Dr. Ginwright has written numerous highly acclaimed books, including The Four Pivots: Reimagining Justice, Reimagining Ourselves. He also wrote Hope and Healing in Urban Education: How Urban Activists and Teachers Are Reclaiming Matters of the Heart, Black Youth Rising: Activism and Radical Healing in Urban America, and Black in School: An Afrocentric Reform, Urban Youth, and the Promise of Hip Hop Culture. Additionally, he has co-edited the influential volume Beyond Resistance: Youth Activism and Community Change, New Democratic Possibilities for Practice and Policy for America's Youth. Dr. Shawn Ginwright resides between Boston, Massachusetts, and Oakland, California, and continues to drive transformative change in education. His relentless dedication to empowering marginalized youth and creating inclusive spaces for healing and growth is truly inspiring. To learn more about his impactful work, you can visit ShawnGinwright.com. Dr. Shawn, we love you. We love your contribution to community, and we are excited, thrilled, enthusiastic about your willingness, your full-throated yes to Centers for Spiritual Living and doing this work, beginning with this time together today.
Thank you.
You.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much,
Thank
Reverend
you.
Andriette. Thank you so much. That's a long bio. I need to shorten it.
But it's long for a reason. There's a lot to share. This isn't just, I've seen long bios, and all long bios are not created equal. This one is long because it needs to be, to tell just a portion of the story of how committed, how dedicated you are, and how there is evidence to prove that that's true.
Thank you, Reverend Andriette. Thank you so much.
Michelle?
You want to ask your question?
Oh, sure. You know what? Can I just start with, this came to my mind, Shawn,
Mhm.
that now that you have, been baked in the four pivots, it took whatever it took in order for you to write it. And I have a question about, what did it take to write it? And then my follow-up would be, now that you have simmered and baked and cooked in it, what have you learned
Mm.
from using the four pivots in leadership?
Yeah. Yeah, great question. I mean, well, first of all, it's an honor to be here. I'm deeply humbled and nervous to be speaking to folks that I admire, the CSL community and what you're doing in the world. And so it's an honor to be able to share this with you. Writing a book, I've written other books that were specifically for sort of educational audiences, and I'm blessed to have a partner and wife, Nedra, and friends who really pushed me to really write something that was more that pushed me into some deep, uncomfortable waters, with a voice that I had hidden for quite some time, and they gave me the wings to say, fly a little bit. And it was really conversations. And so writing the book, it was a 2-year process of, just consistently writing. But I think the lesson that I think I take from that process is to not only trust the process, but trust your own voice and your own inner knowing. And so there are deep moments of insecurity about what I wanted to say, deep moments of even embarrassment of what I wanted to share, deep moments of uncertainty, but it was all true to me. And, at a certain point, that became more important than my insecurity. The truth became more important than my uncertainty and insecurity and those things. And so, the book came from just consistently having that conversation with myself, like write it down first. That's what you really want to say. Now go back and read it. And do you still want to say it, or you might want to say it in a different way? But it was a process of an ongoing conversation with what I wanted to say. And then that other part of my mind saying, well, you can't say it like that. Right. And, but I'm just overwhelmed by the response that the ideas have in people's lives. And I wanted to write something that came from not just my mind, but my experience of my heart, man. Like, this journey is not an intellectual experience. It's a deeply heartfelt and spiritual experience. And I don't always, my own training didn't give me the language or even the permission to speak and write in that way. And so what I take from this is, trust the process and trust myself, and have fun. There's a
And so
second part. Did I
there
get to the
is.
second part? The second part?
The second part is about, now that it's been a while, you had the 2-year writing process, and now you've had, a full year
Yeah.
plus of living in it. How has this informed your leadership? Has there been a change in that? What's happening? How is this sitting with you or arising in you?
I think it has really kind of crystallized my leadership in, like, it's, the four pivots aren't written for easy seas, right? They're not written for, an easy river to cross. And my experience has been that the four pivots has given me the permission and the tools to cross rough rivers, right? At work, Rev, in my personal life, and in my professional life. The move to Harvard was surrounded and saturated with uncertainty. And I never recognized how insecure I was because I've been in a university here in the Bay Area for, 20 years. And I know everybody in the community, and I know how to raise money, and I know how to set up an org, I know this. And so I didn't realize how comfortable I was until God presented me with this opportunity that I first rejected because of my insecurity, right? Like, why would I want to move way across the country? I got a good, I know all my students. I know all the excuses of why not. And so the pivots really grounded me in a way. I've always used these principles, but I think they crystallize for me in moments of difficulty and challenges and uncertainty that I've found really, really helpful and useful, really helpful and useful.
Thank you, Shawn. So the 4 pivots has been of tremendous benefit to my spiritual center. And I know others, because others have shared that, other ministers have included it in their curriculum, if you will, or their own. And it's been a tremendous blessing and gift to us. What's the greatest blessing that it's been to you?
I think the greatest blessing is a sense of that I have something, that I have given something to the world that is meaningful to people's lives. That is deeply gratifying. The gift that I have is that that is giving something to the world and dedicating the time of thoughtful, heartfelt space, and giving that to the world, that it matters, man, that it matters to people. And I've written other things. I think this particular book has, there's nothing like sort of talking to people and hearing them talk about something that they went through, and then they open a passage to the book and they said, this helped me get through this thing. And that's so powerful to me. And so that's the gift that I get when, just being in community with folks and hearing, seeing the book all tattered with highlights in it, and folks going to their favorite passage and they say, this right here, this is the thing that helped me when I was going through this thing. And so that's a gift, Reverend Andriette. It is a gift that to know that it matters, to know that it matters,
Thank you. Sorry, my computer did a little something. Thank you. That's real. So, any surprise? What's been the greatest surprise about this book and you in the book?
The biggest surprise is it's almost like, since the book has been out, God has placed things in my experience that has required me to use these pivots in ways that I thought were just, I could use it at work, right? Or I could use it when I'm having challenges at the job or something like that. But the greatest surprise is like, oh, this is in front of you now, right? Someone said to me, because I was, lots of things were happening in my life, both professionally and personally. And one of my colleagues, friends, have read the book, and she said, well, Shawn, you wrote the book, The 4 Pivots. Your next book is going to be about practicing the 4 pivots. It's easy to write it. And so the biggest surprise has been practicing and using it, right? And the commitment to practice. Some people think that, oh, this is a silver bullet. The 4 pivots are a silver bullet to organizational change or transformation, and just do these 4 things. And it's not. It's the commitment to practice. It's the falling down and failing to do mirror work, and then remembering how to do it when it's time. Right? That is the practice of a pivot. It is not I do mirror work 4 hours a day, every day. No, it's like sometimes we slip into an analysis of things that are separate from us. And that we want to blame, we want to look, we want to cast the thing over there. And it feels good because it's their fault, damn it, right? I ain't got nothing to do with it, right? And that feels good, it's gratifying. And so the practice is, in these moments, is to sit with the mirror, right? And like, okay, what is my responsibility here? How am I accountable for this? What role do I have to play in this? That's a hard journey, and it's not one that I am perfect one. And so it's the practicing, to me, is the biggest lesson and that I think I've taken from this journey.
Thank you. I'm so glad you said that, because just recently I had an occasion to speak to our organization, ministers, practitioners, members of Centers for Spiritual Living. And kind of my first draft was a talk. And then my ultimate talk was my version of kind of coming clean.
Mm.
So here's my question, and I want to share a quote from your book where you say, when we don't turn inward to deal with our own stuff, we build up this false idea about power and ultimately build movements with wounded warriors. Our real power comes from the courage to deal with our fractured relationships, the vulnerability to acknowledge our hurt feelings, and the awareness to know when our ego shows up. That's from page 11. So my question is, how do you suggest that this be applied in an organization that has not yet fully aligned with the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Reverend Arellano said earlier that the book is really speaking to an inward and outward journey. And structural racism and structural inequality and unjust suffering as a result of a collective consciousness that believes that some human beings are less than others is real, right? And so this idea that these structures actually create harm to people, they create damage to ourselves, right? And I think sometimes our relationship with oppression, our relationship to that concept of suffering and oppression, shapes how we see suffering and oppression. And it shapes it in a way that suggests that the only way to move past that hurt is through power that is external to us and not internal to the things to our reality of that experience. And so oftentimes I've found, Rev, that people that love justice hide behind these wounds in the name of justice without having to reconcile the thing that wounded. I have this talk all the time about with my students who have triggers. I'm triggered by this, I'm triggered by that. You shouldn't trigger me. You said this triggered me. And while triggers are significant and important, for me, a trigger is essentially an unhealed wound. And that is your responsibility to engage in a process to heal the thing that hurt, right? And I will aid you, but that responsibility, that thing that hurt me, is my responsibility. And so I don't know if I'm answering your question, but in an organization that has not aligned with DEI work, I think what I'm trying to say is that in organizations, I think it's important to have an acknowledgement of the spaces of how that organization may structure, how that organization may not be advancing DEI, but also what is the social emotional space to have the deeper conversation. DEI, Rev, is not simply a set of policies. You could change the policies in an organization, but fundamentally the people in those organizations need to also transform. And so both of these things need to happen hand in hand. And I think that oftentimes it's easier to look at the policies, practices, and procedures. And now that these policies, practices, and procedures are in an organization, now I could say I have a robust DEI strategy in my organization, but it's not. It's only half of the equation. Both of those things need to be integrally tied to each other and married to one another, both the internal change as well as the structural changes.
So good, so good. So Reverend Andriette can hear because she's in the same room, but she's plugging her computer in.
Okay. I just saw, I didn't know, where did she go? What happened?
We're doing a little dance here at the Silmar, you know, and that kind of feeds into my question, and I think you probably answered a lot of it, and I think it's probably going to be similar. But the first pivot, you know, it's so instrumental in the world and in our teaching of that lens to mirror, mirror to lens, for us to really, it begins within. And so I just thought it would be great to hear from you a little bit of background on what brought you to choose that as your first pivot, and how you see the world utilizing something like this as we evolve.
Yeah. I mean, there are a number of experiences that I had that don't actually show up in the book. But there's two experiences. One experience happened early in my career where I lost a young man who I was mentoring was shot and killed. And it deeply affected me, but I didn't have the tools. What I understood was the presence of guns, the presence of drugs, the kind of structural external stuff, but didn't really have the tools to understand why I was depressed, why I was hopeless, and why I should carry on, right? I had another experience here in Oakland with another colleague of mine, two colleagues of mine. One of them started a school in West Oakland, beautiful school, West Oakland Community School. And she passed away suddenly. And another friend of mine who was a warrior in this work for the youth and justice, he got pneumonia and passed away. And so for me, it was easy for me to lean into a lens explanation of what was going on. But really, what was happening with me was I didn't feel like I couldn't talk about the fact that now I'm having depression, or I'm experiencing anxiety, or I'm experiencing doubt. Like, why should we even continue this justice work? This is the internal dialogue that I didn't have tools to actually deal with. And so the reason I started with those pivots is because in our movements and in our work, I think our default is to point outward. At least for me, our default is to point outward, that this is the problem, this is the thing that happened, this is what needs to be changed, and I'm going to work to do it. And for me, that is half of a profound equation, because the other equation is here. Because I know I'm deeply affected by unjust suffering. I'm deeply affected by the loss of friends. And the mirror work allows me to engage in that journey and that conversation that's healthy about who I need to be and who I need to become and really what I want. So I started with that because for me, that's the basis of transformation. That you can't really engage in transformative work without the tools to go to that inner journey. And so the reflection, the mirror work is the metaphor that I use, which is my mom's mirror, the metaphor is like the mirror is true. The mirror is, and so the quality of our reflection is the degree to which we are telling ourselves the truth, right? That's the quality of the reflection. And so for me, that was the basis, right? How do we build that muscle? of reflection in ways that reflect back at us the truth that we've been hiding from. That is when we have a profound muscle of reflection and doing that mirror work.
So, so good. So metaphysical too, you know, such a part of the teaching here at Centers for Spiritual Living is it begins within. And it just, yeah, and I feel that so much of the challenges that are happening in the world is so much the pointing, and so easy to do as a human being until you move into the inner parts of who we are. And I just love the fact that you picked the word pivot. And I use that in my daily life now. You know, I'm going down a path maybe sometimes in the morning that's not necessarily, you know, I might be a little grumpy or something, and I can pivot to see things a bit differently. And how profound the pivots are. And so my next question for you is around the grind culture and moving from the hustle to the flow. Oh my goodness, you know, we went through this as a team at Centers for Spiritual Living, my director's team, and we did a chapter each week in our meetings. And the feedback that I got from my team was this was the hardest. They understood it, but it's so in us, you know, in our makeup. And such a part of the culture as we've kind of come up maybe in our different careers or however we've moved through things of like almost like this proving our worth.
Yes.
Or, you know, showing our work, right? Like
Yes.
and it's such a shift, such a pivot, and so incredibly important. And so just tell me a little bit more about that pivot and where that came from, and how you feel that could benefit Centers for Spiritual Living, but also the world as a whole.
Yeah, I have a lot to say about that. You know, I struggled with that pivot a little bit because, you know, my dad, my pops, my father was a hustler, right? He worked 2-3 jobs to put food on the table, man, right? He worked in a factory and he painted cars, and he fixed fences to put me and my brothers to get us, put a roof over our head and put me through college. So, you know, even though I use the word hustle, I don't want to demean or dismiss the kind of valiant and glorious efforts that people put in to love their community and family. What I want to highlight is that the seductiveness, the addictions that we adopt unknowingly around white supremacist capitalist culture, which in my view and in my own experience has had a toll on my own mental and behavioral health. And it's not that I'm suggesting that we just, you know, in my own organization, Flourish Agenda, we have this debate, you know, everyone says, hey, we're not in flow right now. I'm like, yeah, but we got to work. You're getting this paycheck to work, right? You actually have to do work. You actually have to go do some stuff. Well, what about flow? What about the nap, you know, ministry and rest? I'm like, yeah, that's cool. And you actually have to work. And so my point is that I'm not suggesting that, you know, it says a pivot from hustle to flow, but really what I'm trying to convey is to develop an awareness of our frenzy, an awareness of our addiction to frenzy, because it is in the awareness of it that we can make a different choice. But when we're not even aware of it, then we continue to engage in it as if this is just the water we swim in. And my own experience, I think I write about it, came from the breakdown I had that forced me to sort of grapple with, there has to be a different way. There has to be another way. And so in this pivot, and I think it resonates, Reverend, with so many people because they feel it. So it's so intimate in people's lives because we have to-do lists and we feel gratified when we're busy. and we're rewarded for always having stuff to do, and it's in our culture. And so that pivot it resonates with folks so much because folks also are tired, and folks also are stressed, and both of those things hold true, right? And I think that pivot in my writing on that section of the book is really just to bring awareness to how we spend our time and the consequences of that choice of how we spend it.
Thank you. Thank you. So good. So many different ways to unpack that one.
Yeah.
And for me personally, and what I know is it's an incredible reminder, because if I can come from a place that I'm more balanced and I've taken care of myself, I am so much better in the places that I'm working in, and how I show up, and it's just incredibly important. So thank you. I think now I will hand it over to Dr. Ray and allow him to ask a couple questions.
Cool. Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Ginwright, for adding to this bibliophile's love of. Thank you so much for what you are bringing and who you are being in the world. It is truly appreciated.
Thank you.
So my question is a two-parter. It starts off with, there's a part in the book where you mention the idea of creating purpose-driven outcomes. And you talk about how when you ask the students, so what is your desired outcome? And they say, we want justice, we want better schools, and we want police accountability. And so when you ask them, I got you, but can you identify specifics? And things get blurry. And you say that to cultivate clarity, we have to get unambiguous about the goals and to be explicit about the outcomes that we want to achieve. So here at CSL, we have a global heart vision that says such things as we create communities where all people and all beings and all life are treated, honored, and celebrated as expressions of God. So, as an organization of ministers, spiritual practitioners, educators, and leaders, how, in your invitation, how do we develop clarity about that? How do we get explicit about those outcomes and those goals? And then the second part is, how do we address the pushback from those who do not like change?
I should have began this whole conversation with, I don't have all these answers, right? I don't have all the answers. So just, I don't pretend to know every nuance of the answers, but I do want to say that, clarity comes from when the dust settles, that clarity comes from quietness and solitude. When I ask my students this question, one of the ways that we can get clarity is, what would I see? What would I feel when I enter into the space of what you're trying to create? Specifically, would I be embraced and hugged? Will I shake someone's hand? Will somebody hand me a sheet of paper? So when I work with my students around the specifics, I ask them to close their eyes and get quiet first. And then I ask them, what does it look like? Take me through your day of justice. When you wake up in the morning, what would you see on TV? Where would you buy your coffee? Who would greet you? Where would you drop your children off? I mean, I really get specific and ask them to visualize that day of justice, or that day of whatever it is they're trying to create. That allows for clarity about the outcome. And that practice over time, consistently engaging in the visualization of the thing, like what would I see, touch, smell, and feel as a result of your activity? And then get quiet with that. And that allows for the students to then settle a little bit, to then begin to name the thing in ways that are actionable. Change is always hard. And, change is hard for everybody, for me as well, right? And I think that for me, by creating a compelling possibility, a compelling possible future that enrolls people, right? How are you enrolling people in that possible compelling future? Some ways can mitigate, right? Some ways can mitigate this notion of, I don't like this change, right? When people are enrolled in that compelling future. And that's just about inclusion, including folks to have and create that compelling vision. And this is why I say the pivots, Reverend, are they're braided together, right? Because to have possibility thinking and to sort of disrupt our notion that our jobs as leaders and spiritual leaders, as educators, are to only solve problems, you also have to have, you have to divorce yourself from hustle. And you also have to cultivate transformative relationships. And so these are braided together so that they all support each other as we move forward.
Excellent, thank you. And that ties into my second inquiry. Within New Thought, there's often this concept of engaging in spiritual bypass or metaphysical malpractice or whatnot, where people will say that they are doing the work. So in this, what would you offer someone as a practice or as a step into greater awareness so that we know if we're actually pivoting and not simply just turning? Like, are we actually practicing it, or are we fooling ourselves thinking we're practicing it, but we're really not? What would your invitation be?
I mean, for me, it is, are we producing the results in our lives that we want consistently, right? Are we, so if we choose, are we creating the impact in our lives that we intend? Are we living in a space of truthfulness? My own experience, Rev, I can only speak from my experience, and my experience is that the pivots offer so much profound grace. It is so much easier to walk into grace than it is to fight the other thing, right? And I think when people are walking in that grace, and that when they're using the pivots and they're walking into grace, you could see it, right? You could feel it. And again, it is not the silver bullet that, people are gonna, it's a practice, right? So sometimes there are some pivots that'll be harder for some than others. And my wife has always said, there should be, the book, she pushed me to say there should be a fifth pivot. Maybe that'll be the next book. And the fifth pivot, I just kind of buried in the last chapter, but it is the pivot between accountability and grace, right? And that dance between accountability and grace can capture this entire book. But I think your question about how do we know someone is, actually doing the pivots, the real question is how are we offering them grace to explore it? And how are we holding them accountability towards their own dreams and imagination? And so, I think we have to balance and be able to be fluent in accountability and grace, and be able to sort of dance between them in ways that allow us to continue to move forward in ways that are consistent with our values. And so, accountability is important, but we also have to use grace. So I don't know if that answered your question, but
Thank you. I was shooing a bug, not you, Dr. Ray.
I thought you were saying, oh, amen. I thought you were saying amen, Rev. I thought you was going like that. That's what my mama do. My mama go like, amen. So I thought that's what you was doing. I thought you was doing a little call and response.
Oh, response. There we go. The spirit took me over. We need to finalize this. We only have 10 minutes left. Great questions, everybody. I feel so blessed to be in this panel with these two beautiful beings here. And there's such incredible lights in our organizations and advocates for justice, and so beautiful that they could be here. And Dr. Andriette for bringing this amazing Dr. Shawn Ginwright into our organization and introducing him to us. Thank you so much. And the final question that I would have for the time that we have left, Dr. Shawn, is, now what? You've written this book. I mean, you've kind of talked about maybe there's more pivots that might come, or putting pivots into action, and now you're at Harvard. And, if you want to give us a little bit about that. And I know that you have a passion for youth programs, which I share with you, 20 years with Boys and Girls Club, and the youth is where it's at. And so maybe just, anything in those areas that you'd like to share with us.
Yeah, no, great question. I want to talk a little bit about dreaming and imagining, right? And the, most of my work for most of my career has been kind of doing and kind of goal setting, but I feel like I'm in a space where I could dream and imagine. And what I dream about is not just sort of writing books, but bringing people together to build communities of people practicing and living in these pivots, right? I imagine hosting retreats in beautiful places around the world, where people are coming together, and I bring people like you three to the retreat to facilitate these profound conversations about the pivots, and it relates in its relationship to spiritual principles. I believe that so there's so much focus on professional development in whatever profession you're in, and it's almost absent of any personal growth and development. And so I imagine bringing principals and superintendents and executive directors to Puerto Rico for a week, and saturate them with these principles about leadership transformation, so that they go back full of life and full of vision for the young people in that community. I imagine bringing mayors together and political parties together who do not see eye to eye, and bringing them together in Thailand and having them reimagine what's important for this country, rather than sort of always having these political divisions. I imagine bringing people from Congress, from both sides of the aisle together, and having them talk about their children and the challenges they're having with their children, so that they might see some humanity, even though they disagree with them politically, they still see them as human. I believe that this is what I dream about, right? This is what I dream about. I dream about using this platform that I have now at Harvard to be able to pull together powerful people who are doing work, people who care about our communities, and giving them a different pathway and a set of tools to engage differently and to lead differently. That's what I dream about. That's what I imagine.
Wow. It sounds like a drink of fresh water when you're incredibly thirsty for the world right now. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I honor all the work that you do, and your imagining and your vision is absolutely divine, and anything that we could do to support you let us know.
Well, you already are. You definitely already are.
And I'm just
But once I do get that retreat set, I will be reaching back to you, to all three of you, for an invitation to come and talk about your experience in the 4 pivots and do some training.
so I'll speak for the three of us and say yes.
All right.
Yes.
All right. That's how we build. That's how we build.
Channel your mama. Yeah, that sounds beautiful. And I'm gonna actually call on Dr. Andriette to just say a final few words as we close out. And I just honor this beautiful soul too. Thank you,
Got the
Dr.
passport ready.
Don't have me go home and pack now. Shawn, I am so grateful. You know, there's something about a local treasure that often causes us to take that one for granted or make certain assumptions. And I am right now so aware of the expansion in your thinking and the largeness of your heart. And that heart-mind connection, I tell you, I'm trusting. I'm trusting that divine guidance will continue to inspire you and urge you like that hand at the small of your back to be exactly where you need to be, to make the essential difference that you are here called to make. I'm so grateful. I'm grateful for this contribution that you've already made to well, I started to say heart and soul because that's true, but to Centers for Spiritual Living and the way that we are drinking it in and beginning to see the impress of your consciousness and your wisdom and your efforts on our organization. And it feels like just in time. Just in time. Thank you so, so very much. Thanks to your staff for them supporting us and getting to this point. And thank you for taking the time and giving us the attention that you have. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And it's been such a pleasure. And you already are helping to push out these ideas to have an impact on the world. And, you know, my dream is that these ideas continue, you know, far beyond me, far beyond me.
And we are so grateful that you are going to be our hero of the year. And yay, 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 yay. And be on our education uplift and Susie Charleston, who knows already the course of love that is going into that conference. For you to be our keynote is just divinely laid out for us and to have an impact of love there. So thank you for that and for being who you are and sharing your beautiful soul with this world. You are truly a gift.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Blessings.
Thank y'all so much. You've made my whole week has been made. I feel so full.
My whole month.